And it's time now for our paper review with the broadcaster and journalist Afia Hagan and Mary McLeod, a former policy advisor to the Queen and the royal household, who also served as a Conservative MP. A very warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. Afia, let's start with one of your picks first, if I may. The front page of the Eye today, just more strike news, and obviously it's looking like it's going to roll into January as well. What more can you tell us on this?
Absolutely, it does look that way, that we are going to have these rolling strikes for the foreseeable future. We just had the ambulance drivers on strike this week. Last week it was the nurses. And it looks like other members of the NHS are digging in for a battle with number 10. So in January we could see more strikes from junior doctors as well as nurses and ambulance drivers on this continuing dispute over pay and conditions. Now, number 10 said that they are prepared to look unpopular because they are not prepared to negotiate with unions. And it seems that in this winter, where there's lots of viruses about, and at this time where it's very cold, you know, you have lots of falls and things like that and viruses around, this is a time where really we need our NHS to be at its best. But the reality is, it hasn't been at its best for so long. You have pharmacies that are running out of antibiotics. You have kids that are getting strep A. It all seems that all the broken parts of the NHS are broken at the same time. And rather than the NHS being on its knees, the wheels have come off completely and it's lying flat on its face. So this is a time where the government should really be doing everything that they can to negotiate with unions and to realise that our NHS really needs a boost of income and a boost of government ministers that actually care about the people who work in it, people who work very hard to look after us and should no way be using food banks. So I really think it's time that the government just came to the table with the unions, offered paying conditions that would actually mean they have a better standard of living, and remembering that this is just not about pay. It's about conditions within the NHS and it's about patient care.
Mary, just a thought from you on this before we move on, if I may. You know, you served as a Conservative MP. What do you make of how the government's handling this industrial action?
Well, it's a difficult time, and I think there's a huge support for nurses out there and frontline staff in the NHS. So it's whereas people do want it to be paid fairly, it's a time where the government also has to look at what that fairness is. But it's really important that they sit around a table, talk about it, and come to some conclusion, because no one wants strike action, and therefore we want to make sure there's a good resolution quickly on this so that patients don't suffer.
Okay, and just moving on to the front page of the Times, an article that you picked out today, another big talking point in politics is, of course, this new gender recognition law brought in, or at least voted for yesterday in Holyrood. What more can you tell us on this? Suggestions that Westminster could veto it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So this was the Scottish Parliament, the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, and it allows trans people to self-declare their gender, to make it easier to change your gender also at a younger age. So it lowers the minimum age from 18 to 16 to get a gender recognition certificate, and you don't need to go through a medical diagnosis for that. So some people are worried about it. It did get a large majority in the Scottish Parliament to pass the bill. So Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, has said the government might be prepared to veto it and prevent it getting royal assent. They can use Article 35 to do that. I don't think they've done it before, so this would be something new. But I think his perspective was that he was worried that it threatened the safety of women and children. And some will think 16 is too young, and that it's better for young people to get time to work out what gender they really want to be. So it's so they'll be looking at the effects sort of in England, and one of the examples they've used, of course, is prison inmates who might demand to be in women's prisons, and that's around the sort of safety of women and children. But this did get passed by the Scottish Parliament, so it will be a bit of a fight, I think, to use the Article 35 if the UK government do not want to give it royal assent, and therefore I'm expecting that this will end up in the Supreme Court, or it will certainly end up in court in some way to resolve it.
Afia, is there anything you want to add on that story before we move on? It's provoked strong emotions on both sides, hasn't it?
It absolutely has, and this is something that's been discussed so widely across social media, and of course there is two sides to every argument. A lot of people in the trans community were seeing this as a victory actually yesterday, that they would get to self-ID a lot younger, and obviously a lot of people go through huge trauma deciding or realising that they're born the wrong gender and that they need to reassign you. It's a huge thing to have to go through. And the Scottish Parliament deciding that people should be able to do this at a younger age would help a lot of people. But yes, there are some huge safety concerns around young people. Are they too young at that age to be able to decide such a huge life decision and continue down a medical pathway that can be really hard to reverse? So it's a very, very difficult one for young people and their families. But the argument is in Scotland that if you're young enough to vote at 16, then why shouldn't you be young enough to do this as well? So it seems that Nicola Sturgeon with this is going to have a fight on her hands.
We don't have long left, so just a quick thought from you on the front page of the Mirror that the King's security is being stepped up. Afia?
Yes, that's right. So in a year where we've had the King do various walkabouts, he had eggs thrown at him a couple of times now. There are security concerns about the annual walkabout that takes place after the royal family goes to church in Sandringham at Christmas Day. Christmas last year, someone actually managed to break into Sandringham with a crossbow, which was very, very concerning. So now there are concerns amongst the Met Police, amongst the King's protection officers about the walkabout, about whether it should take place and whether there should be heightened security. The Prince and Princess of Wales and their children due to join as well on Christmas morning.
Afia and Mary, we're going to have to leave it there, but Mary McLeod, I do want to get your thoughts on that as well, having obviously worked for the royal household. We'll speak to you both in the next hour. Thank you. More coming up at the top of the hour.